Hey, it's Mike Gill from the Sports Patch. If you're an advertising salesperson, how would you like to sell my show, The Sports Bash, here at 97.3 ESPN and Town Square Media? We're hiring new advertising salespeople to sell The Sports Bash, the #1 sports talk show in all of South Jersey at the #1 media company in South Jersey. Selling The Sports Bash is the job that will take you as far as you want to go. An excellent compensation package awaits you, as does a creative and fun working environment. So join the team on The Sports Bash and Town Square Media. It's truly the most advanced media company in all of South Jersey. Start or build upon your sales career by becoming a member of our team here at 97.3 ESPN and Town Square Media. If you're interested, apply at townsquaremedia.com. Click on careers. Town Square Media is an equal opportunity employer.
South Jersey's home of the Sports Bash with Mike Gill.
Well, something to think about, for sure.
WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City. A Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is 97.3 ESPN. This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We watch the show. Hello, everybody. How you doing out there? Hope you're having a great weekend. It feels like summer. Last weekend, it felt like October. This weekend, it feels a lot more like June. That's for sure. It looks like it. It feels like everyone's being safe out there on the roads. I know it's a little crazy out there right now, but be safe. Stay hydrated. Put your air conditioning on, all right? You're driving around out there. We got a lot to get to on the show today. We got to talk some Sixers. We got to talk some Eagles. Also, Phillies. Frank Klose, our Phillies insider for 97.3 ESPN.com. We'll join the show coming up at 12:20. We'll also preview the full slate of NBA playoff action round 2. Jonathan Von Tobel rejoins us. He joined us for the preview of the first round of games a couple of weeks ago. He is back for the second round of games, and you might be surprised who he's picking in the Sixers-Hawks series and why. So he's coming on at 1:20. As always, take your text messages at 609-403-0973. For all of you listening on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can comment on the stream while you watch the stream right here on 97.3 ESPN. So before we get into too much else, I want to start with the Eagles because I talked about this a couple days ago. And I wanted to run it back. By the way, a little breaking Phillies news, actually. Phillies have reinstated Bryce Harper off the 10-day injured list and have placed Hector Neris on the paternity list. So swap one in, swap one out. So Harper is back, but you don't have your closer. So a little breaking Phillies news right there. Phillies lineup has Harper slated in the 3 slot right now. So we will get into more details with Frank about that coming up in less than 20 minutes here on 97.3 ESPN. But as I said, I want to get to some of the Eagles stuff because I brought this up a couple days ago. And I think that I don't think people are appreciating this enough. Okay. And listen, if I'm overreacting to this, you can argue with me. Okay. Shoot a text to the text board, 609-403-0973. Or if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, just comment on the stream. Devonta Smith, after he signed his rookie contract this week, talked to the media. And he said something that just stood out extremely to me. When he was asked by the media, Devonta Smith, what he was going to do with his rookie contract, he said, put it in the bank. Now, to some people, they may be like, okay, whatever. But to me, it's a sign of maturity. Because a lot of times, these young guys, oh, I'm going to buy my mom a house. I'm going to buy myself a car. I'm going to get this. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to go on a vacation. Devonta Smith is treating his NFL money like a mature professional would in any profession. He's not getting too high. He's not getting too low. He's invested in his job. You have a quarterback, your starting quarterback, Jalen Hurts, who says, we got to pay rent every day. Your first round wide receiver, Devonta Smith, he's not even going to spend his money. Most of it, he's going to just put it in the bank and be smart with his money. Is it just me, or do this team sound like a bunch of adults and not a bunch of children? And it's refreshing. Listen, if you got money and you want to spend it, that's fine. But a lot of times we realize that a lot of the stuff we did as kids, it's just not smart. It's just not mature. It's just ridiculous. And to bring this kind of maturity to this team as young men is a great sign of their commitment to the game of football. They're treating it like a profession. They're treating it like a job. They're not treating it like, oh, I'm going to live up the life. I'm going to party up. I'm going to go crazy. Because we know what happens to the guys who go too party, go too crazy, have too much fun. They're not as focused on the game. The maturity being shown by players like Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts, Jalen Reagor coming out and saying that he has a chip on his shoulder and he wants to prove everybody wrong. To me, I think we need to let this season play out. I know there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh, this team, they need to trade for Julio Jones. They need to make this deal or they need to make that deal. Why are we so afraid to actually let this situation play out? How many times have we heard the Eagles are too old? The Eagles, they're not young enough. The Eagles, they need more youth on the roster. Now you have youth on the roster. Let them have a chance to play. Why are we so obsessed with replacing people as soon as possible? I don't understand it at all. I understand we live in a world where everybody wants their mac and cheese in a minute or less. But this is football. This is the real world. This isn't your lousy diet with junk food. Let the situation play out. Let the situation mature. You don't eat a banana when it's green. You wait till it turns yellow. You need it to mature. You need it to develop. But yet, we don't treat our athletes that way. The impatience and the desire for immediate satisfaction gets so out of control. And I think it's about time that we start appreciating the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles have some people in Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts and others who are mature and beyond their years. Just because someone like Sirianni doesn't talk the way you want them to talk or think the way you want them to think or act the way you want them to act doesn't mean that this team is not going to be successful moving forward. We can nitpick the roster all we want. But at the end of the day, I think it's about time we actually let the young Eagles mature, let them play, let them develop, and let's see what happens. Don't get so carried away with things that don't matter. At the end of the day, I want to see these young guys out there playing. I want to see them out there playing. I want to see them doing well. And I'm looking forward to it. And just like with this competition for left tackle, which, as I said on the locker room with Billy Schwein just a few minutes ago, I generally think that Jordan Mailata is a strong favorite right now. I think Mailata is a guy who, me, this guy can be Jason Peters level if he's fully developed. I really think that Mailata can be that good. And you know what? You watch the 76ers and you see a guy like Joel Embiid who's only played basketball for 10 years, last 10 years of his life, last 12 years. Mailata's only played NFL football American altogether for a couple of years now. And he's already a starting left tackle caliber. Imagine what he can be in a few more years when he gets more time, more practice, more reps, how excellent he can be. It's not offense to Andre Dillard. I'm just being real with you. I think Mailata is the real deal. Josh Hennig here on Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch and comment on the show. Sixers tomorrow versus the Hawks. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. You guys want to comment who you think is going to win the series? I personally think it's going to be the Sixers. Embiid or no Embiid. And I don't expect Embiid to play tomorrow. I think the Sixers are playing some shell games with their opponents. I think they're making the Hawks think by calling it a day-to-day. You force the Hawks to prepare for two scenarios, with Embiid and without Embiid. I think that is a huge part of this for the Sixers. They're trying to manipulate the Hawks. And I think the Sixers are going to win this series. If you ask me how, I'm going to assume it's 7 games. Because either it's going to be the home teams win all the games, which is completely possible, or it's going to be a bunch of splits in the first 4 games where the teams alternate wins. Win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. And then it's a best of 3 series and the Sixers win out because they have the home court advantage. That's how I see the series playing out. Embiid or no Embiid, the Sixers have 2 things the Hawks don't. Number one, the 76ers have more depth. They have more weapons to throw at you. If you trade Trae Young off of this team, they don't have a very good team. Okay? You don't have the firepower necessary to win in the NBA playoffs if you don't have Trae Young out there. I'm not saying you're going to try to get Trae Young in the foul trouble. What I'm saying is that look at the NBA playoffs. One of the easiest ways to win games is to say, I don't care if one guy gets a bunch of points. I need the rest of the team to not go off. Bradley Beal, almost every game in that series in the first round, scored over 30 points. Didn't matter. The best players, the best scorers are going to get theirs no matter what defense you throw at them. But if you can limit their ability to impact the game in other ways, to elevate their teammates, to make their team better, you have a chance to win. Look at the Clippers-Mavs game last night. It's cute that Luka had a triple-double, but how many plays did he look out of it because the Clippers just took him out of plays numerous times? Guys can get good numbers. Guys can get good stats. You know why? Because they're superstars. They're all-stars. They're great players. But you know who's not an all-star and a superstar? Clint Capella. Great rebounder. Solid defender. Not a superstar. John Collins. Phenomenal athlete. Good, solid player. Not a superstar. Bogdanovich, Herter, Hunter. Good players, not superstars. Lou Williams is the only player aside from Trae Young who can get his own points without help. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that you have a group of players on this team for the Hawks who cannot get points unless Trae Young puts them in a position to get those points. They're not scoring creators. And that's where the Sixers can beat the Hawks. And I believe that if I can figure that out, the Sixers coaching staff, whose only job is to play and win basketball games, can figure out what Josh Hennig, can figure out. I'm not watching basketball tape 24 hours a day, but I can figure it out. I'm sure the Sixers can too. So if they can do that, I think they can win this series. You let Trae Young get his. If Trae Young scores 35 points a game, who cares? Because they can still lose. Because the purpose of Trae Young as a scorer is to open up opportunities for his teammates. So keep that in mind as you watch this series. Are the Sixers limiting his supporting cast from being genuinely supportive, or are they leaving too much on Trae Young's shoulders? We'll get to your thoughts and comments throughout the hour. The text board is open, 609-403-0973. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I see Steve. Excuse me. I see Steve. I see Dan. I see other people chiming in. We'll get to your comments a little bit later this hour, but coming up next, Phillies insider Frank Klose joins us next. Bryce Harper is back in the lineup today, but doesn't really matter. We'll find out from Frank Klose coming up next right here on Sports Bash Saturday with yours truly, Josh Hennig, on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City, and we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the Sports Bash with Mike Gill, Game That with Josh Hennig, as well as Sports Bash Saturday.
It's Sixers playoff basketball tomorrow, right here on 97.3 ESPN, with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McInnes, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Maxey steals the ball. Maxey on the run with Westbrook there, and he jammed it.
It's Sixers Hawks Game 1 tomorrow. Coverage begins at 1 p.m. It's Philadelphia 76ers playoff basketball, and it's only on South Jersey's official Sixers station, 97.3 ESPN.
You asked for it. You got it. Fast Track Checkout at either Matt Blatt Kia location. Buy it your way. Complete your purchase online or have us deliver it during the Trade Up to a Kia sales event at Matt Blatt Kia in Egg Harbor Township or Tom's River. 0 money down and 0% financing for up to 60 months on every 2021 Kia Soul, Sportage, or Forte. Plus, we need your trade, even if you owe thousands more than it's worth. Get out of that old car you hate with 0 down payment and 0% APR financing available for up to 60 months. Try Fast Track Checkout. Purchase completely online and have us deliver right to your home or office. Only at Matt Blatt Kia, where you can't make a mistake with our 4-day love it or leave it return policy.
It's gotta be a Matt Blatt Kia.
Offers with approved Tier 1 or 2 credit through Kia Motors Finance. Not all will qualify. 0% based on 1667 per 1,000 borrowed. Negative equity financed into new loan. Go to mattblattkianj.com for complete details. Expires 7/6/2021. Matt Blatt Kia, 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township. And now on Route 37 in Tom's River.
It for a few weeks, then sell it for big profit. And if you're a buyer looking for better odds than what a sportsbook can offer, there's never been a better time to join PropSwap. As new users right now, get a free $100 match bonus. But hurry, the offer expires soon. Check out PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. As promised, joining us right now on the Boardwalk High Hotline, our Phillies insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, Frank Klose. Harper is back in the lineup. It doesn't really matter. What is the state of the Phillies after Memorial Day? You don't usually wait till Memorial Day to find out where a team is at. You can't judge too much after April. You got to wait till Memorial Day. Well, heading into Friday night's game, there were 4 games back, and then they lose a game on a very costly situation. And Frank Klose now joins us as the Phillies are back in action later this afternoon with Bryce Harper back in the lineup. Frank, how you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing pretty good. And obviously, a lot of Philly fans will be happy to know that Harper's back in the lineup. But Frank, does it really matter?
I think so. You know, there's enough games left that the Phillies can go on a win streak and become relevant. Now, they do have that 1 5-game winning streak so far this season. They don't look right now like a team that's going to go on one. But I still think when they get healthy, if Didi's healthy, if Bryce is truly healthy and in this lineup, they can roll out some wins in a row. I wrote about it extensively over the last week, 10 days, that the Phillies lineup just isn't what it usually is when you're missing one of those 4 expensive players, Gene Segura, Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Didi Gregorius. So once Didi is back, the lineup will function the way that it was designed to. You're going to stop playing so many people out of position, like Brad Miller in right field, right? Bryce being in right field, you're better from a defensive standpoint because Brad Miller is not a right fielder, right? So the Phillies are still within striking distance, and the National League East as a whole has been plagued by injury after injury. You know, Nationals just lost Strasburg again. The Mets, they had more than I can count. So they're still hanging around. I mean, the National League East is far from decided yet as far as I'm concerned.
When you think about also when it comes to, you mentioned the National League East, you know, I said before the year, Frank, and I'll be straight up honest, I didn't think there was going to be 2 key teams come out of the East for the postseason, and the Phillies at 26-30. It feels like the NL East, it's all division or nothing. So if you're a team like the Phillies, you really need to start piling on some of these wins against the people in your division to hope you have a chance down the stretch, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, last night, usually you expect from Max Scherzer and Zach Wheeler it'll be a low-scoring game, but you particularly thought of it when you're missing the Harpers and Gregorius is out of the lineup. So I think they'll be a lot more competitive as time goes on. And really, but only if, here's the big if these injuries that Harper has had and Gregorius has had and Segura has had and Realmuto has had, as long as they're not nagging, because you've seen the team function as a full lineup. You've seen the pitching has been good at pretty much, even with Vince Velasquez, he said he's been good at times. I'm not ready to declare him the answer to all their ills, but those big 3 starters they have in Eflin, Wheeler, Nola, you should be able to win most of those games. And when that lineup was not together, they weren't winning most of those games. So really, much will depend on their health, and they have to be really healthy, not just. What we saw kind of killed the Phillies a lot is you had players in the starting lineups that really weren't healthy or trying to work through an injury. Well, we don't want to put them on the injured list right now because we think we can hang out for a couple of days and wait and carry a short bench. I think that is what really hurt the Phillies in this past stretch is the combination of the injuries themselves out of the lineup and also having the short bench and then causing players like Brad Miller to have to play a position that is not his.
Frank Klose, Phillies insider for 97.3 ESPN.com, joining us here on the Boardwalk Hotline here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. the news that broke just about 20 minutes ago. Bryce Harper returns for the Phillies, batting third in the lineup today. Hector Neris goes on paternity leave. He will be back basically at some point. So no exact timetable on him. I know usually like 4 to 7 days, but at least Harper is back in the lineup. And that gets me the next question, Frank. A lot of people, they know the Phillies need something, right? We all know the Phillies need more. The way they're constructed right now, this is not a team that will make the postseason. But if you are Dave Dombrowski, or if Dave Dombrowski picks up the phone and calls Frank Klose, what are you suggesting the priority should be? Because this weekend, it's Spencer Howard and it's Vince Velasquez are your pitchers. And a lot of people, they're frustrated with Hoskins. They're frustrated with McCutchen. They're not happy with Herrera. So what are your priorities if you were setting them in terms of how to improve this team before the deadline?
Well, you got to catch the ball. So I would call down to Baltimore and say, hey, what will it take to get Freddie Galvis? Not because I think Freddie Galvis should be your starting shortstop by any means, but if Didi Gregorius is out of the lineup, or even Gene Segura, you want somebody who can play top defense up in one of those positions. So I would look for maybe not Freddie in particular, who has 9 home runs, by the way, which is kind of interesting from Freddie Galvis. But somebody like him, that's a defensive infielder that you can maybe move around a little bit. And then someone who can play a solid outfield too. You mentioned Andrew McCutchen. I think if the Phillies had their druthers, Andrew McCutchen would not be playing as much as he's been playing, but he's had to play as much as he's been playing because you've had an injury to Bryce Harper. You've had injuries in other places, in center field, of course. And so you're forced to play him every single day. He needs some days off. Now, that could come in the form of Brad Miller, again, who I said is not necessarily an outfielder, but maybe he's passable if you have another outfielder that can play a solid left field and maybe bat from the left side. So someone who is basically Matt Joyce, but better. So maybe a platoon type, maybe someone who's mostly been a starter. I don't know that. Remember Corey Dickerson? I'm not suggesting they only go get ex-Phillies, but Corey Dickerson is an example of a type of player that might be the type of person that would be helpful to a team. So a good outfielder that can be a better sub, because you're probably not done with these little nagging injuries, infield and outfield. And I didn't even address pitching yet, but it's always good to have pitching.
Frank, when you talk about the defensive side, do you think that was a situation? Because a lot of people are frustrated with their defense, right? Do you think that was just a pure oversight in their construction of the team, or did they genuinely think that the defense would be better than it's been?
They definitely thought that it would be better than it's been. I think that is absolutely the case. It doesn't help that you've had these players out of position. I mean, once you have the sub in, right? Remember the subs that Brad Miller is generally seen as a really good sub, right? But I know if you put Brad Miller at second base, he'll hit for you, but he's not going to play the same type of defense that Gene Segura will, right? Nick Maton actually was pretty good with the glove, but some of the other options that we've seen thrown in there haven't been as good. They're going to be better than they've been, I think, when everybody is playing. The Phillies, according to many reports, I think it's been widely reported, the Phillies actually kind of wanted Andrelton Simmons to be their shortstop rather than Didi Gregorius, and the reason why is they thought he brought better defense. They weren't able to get it, so they didn't think Didi was going to be that big a drop-off. And, of course, we know Didi's been dealing with these nagging injuries, so they definitely thought it would be better. And then the extra people out of position doesn't help either. And, Alec Boehm last year, I will say this about Alec Boehm. In the short sample size last year, you looked at him and you thought, oh, he might be okay there. Kind of the same way a few years ago, they saw a small sample size of Rhys Hoskins in left field and decided they should go get Carlos Santana because Rhys Hoskins would be good enough. And then in the larger sample size, you say, oh, no, maybe not. So I still think that that's going to be an issue. A lot of what happens to resolve that isn't going to happen during the year. Long term, you could see Alec Boehm in left field. You might see him at first base. A lot might depend on whether or not there's a designated hitter or how they construct this lineup long term in terms of Hoskins and Boehm. One of them probably not being able to stick around if there's no DH, but they're going to just have to live with that. And if you get a good defensive sub like a Galvis, again, I'm not suggesting they only get ex-Phillies, but he's a name that people are familiar with in terms of profile. He could play third base in the late innings when you know that your score is tight and you're trying to protect a win. So you'll be able to, with a couple pieces, I think you might be able to alleviate some of that. They definitely thought it would be better than it was this first part of the year. And perhaps there's still room to improve, right? I mean, they can't be, of course, we said this last year about the bullpen, right? They can't be this bad forever, right? Well, that bullpen last year was that bad for the rest of the season. So, but good news is it's a larger season this year, more of an opportunity for them to improve. So hopefully by the end of next month, you'll have a better idea of what you really, really need.
And that opens the door right up for my next question, Frank, is where do you focus with the pitching staff to improve it? Would you go starter or bullpen first? Because I feel there's an argument that can be made for both directions because of the reality that, Eflin, he's been up and down. Velasquez, we're all waiting on the bottom to drop out, right? Wheeler and Nola, we know what they are. And Howard, we're still trying to wait and figure it out. Whereas the bullpen, the hope was, like you said, hey, they can't be any worse than last year. No, they can't. But at the same time, it's a long season. You need more reinforcements back there.
Yeah, there's never enough pitching. I don't care what season it is, what team it is. 4 aces, Phillies still needed to add pitching right at the deadline. The starter would be helpful. I think one key thing will be to see and kind of check in where Spencer Howard is as you get to the end of July. Are you using many of his innings? Because there is this self-imposed innings limit apparently that nobody knows what the number is, but that exists. So you might want some help there if there's a veteran available. But I don't know. I don't know what's going to be out there in terms of a starter. That I still don't think the Phillies will give up a lot in terms of prospects for a short-term piece. So, and they don't really have a lot of money to just take money off somebody's hands. So I don't know what's going to be out there. I mean, the acquisition might not be much better than the Chase Anderson, Matt Moore types like a couple of years ago when they grabbed Drew Smyly, So I just say get what you can at this point and really decide who is expendable in your roster and who's not. And meanwhile, as this is happening, keep an eye on AAA. I mean, Adonis Medina was supposed to be a decent pitching prospect for the Phillies. Could he help them at some point? Kind of remains to be seen. They've been pretty conservative with the starting pitchers at AAA so far in terms of the innings they're throwing. Who knows? Maybe because they want to see who can help them down the stretch. So there's still a lot of time before the end of next month, and you just really have to see where you're at, who's available, who you can get. I certainly don't think the pen is by far perfect, but it's kind of been under the radar since the offense has struggled so much, but they've been kind of okay. I mean, just okay. I'm not saying terrible, or excellent, but they haven't been terrible. They've been all right. Ranger Suarez has been helpful. Kind of see how he goes the next several months. He's pitched some longer outings. Is he a rotation option? We'll see. But it's really strange because last season being so short, it was really the sprint of a baseball season that you're never supposed to have, and now it's a long stretch, and we're kind of seeing are some of these players able to do this long season and have a marathon after exerting all that energy last year on a sprint. So I would get to July, see what you have, and more importantly, what you can get. But hang on to the top prospects like Mick Abel and Bryson Stott because you're going to need them.
Frank Klose joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN. At Frank Klose on Twitter. That's Klose with a K. His Phillies mailbag is every Tuesday on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill. So make sure you're following Frank to send your questions in each and every week to the mailbag. Frank, as you mentioned the minor leagues, a guy in the minor leagues is Adam Haseley. He's down there. They're hoping to have him back soon. What are your thoughts on him and his return and how he might impact what this team does ahead of the trade deadline?
Well, the Phillies thought highly of him before the season, even to the point where even if he was going to be a platoon player, they wanted him to have the opening day start in center field, even though it was against a lefty. He's going to really have to be the second half of center field, and hopefully as I was just saying a moment ago, he could spell Andrew McCutchen in left a little bit. If you're facing a tough righty, and McCutchen's been doing much better against lefties and righties, you might want to put Adam Hastley in left field for some of the games. And I think Adam Hastley is going to give you some superior defense. And as long as Herrera is kind of hanging around, and after that really rough start, he's certainly been making a lot of contact. But I'll say this too. I mean, Herrera, we've known him in his career to be very, very hot at times and very, very cold at times. In a way, I was just kind of waiting for the cold streak to hit, and he's kind of kept it up. So if Herrera's your center fielder, leave him alone. And Adam Hastley, there's definitely opportunities to play, probably in left field. And now that McCutchen's further down in the order, and if Adam Hastley's going to play best 6th or 7th against righties, he might be able to give you a little something. So I didn't get to check in with him last night and see how he did last night, but his first game back in the minor leagues, he was 1 for 3 with the walk. So, I mean, certainly no alarm bells like Scott Kingery and Mickey Moniak, who are each 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. But that would be really huge that the Phillies could add him back, because when you subtracted Adam Hastley, you just left the organization with a big hole, and to the point where Travis Jankowski is center fielder number 6 on the depth chart, and he's on the roster right now. So Phillies could really, really stand to benefit from Adam Hastley being healthy. He hasn't really spoken about the reason for his departure, but hopefully he is well, and somebody that can spell McCutchen, and an outfield of Harper, Herrera, and Hastley, you feel a lot better defensively as well.
Frank, one more before I let you go, and I always appreciate you jumping on here, especially on a Saturday. Hoskins and Bohm, I feel like that's a conversation that we're going to be having until the day that those two are not on this team anymore. Hoskins having a better year right now than Bohm, but that might be expected because Hoskins is older and more experienced at the major league level. So what do you think the future is for those two guys, the Phillies? Is there going to come a point in time where they have to choose between those two guys? Do they want to keep those two guys? Is it one of those situations where in order for them to maybe get to the next level, they have to trade one of those guys? What are your thoughts?
Well, a lot depends on whether or not there's a designated hitter next year. I think the Phillies thought there might be. I mean, a lot of teams around the league thought there might be this year. I think it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And if that's the case, you have to decide basically if you want 2 first base types as your DH and your first baseman, or if you think that it's better to use the DH spot as sort of a rotating day off, like you saw them use it last year, and give it bats to Real Muto and others that otherwise would play the field. That might be helpful. My initial impression of Hoskins, Bohm, before he came up, I thought he would play 2 years. I thought maybe the Phillies thought he would play 2 years at third base and then maybe replace McCutchen in left field. What they haven't done since he's come up is really put him in the outfield at all. He's played some first base. That seems to be the only other option that they've used him so far. But I think the outfield could be an option for Bohm. And if he's playing left field and hitting just fine, maybe you're not worried about that defense. But, that's kind of the decision. That's a long-term decision. And it could weigh upon who the Phillies can get this offseason. I mean, there's some nice shortstops that are on the free agent market. Would you consider moving somebody to third base and putting Bohm in the outfield? And if there's a DH, that changes the discussion greatly. So lots of options, but unfortunately, I think that's a situation where you're going to have to maybe consider a late inning sub for this year, and going into next year, try to figure out the bigger picture with what's available to you to construct a strong starting lineup.
He's Frank Klose. Follow him on Twitter at Frank Klose. That's Klose with a K. Phillies mailbag every Tuesday with Mike Gill on the Sports Bash. Follow him to send in your Phillies questions. The Phillies continue their homestand. The good news is, Frank, the Phillies are 1-1 in the month of June. So at least they're 500, right?
Well, they need to be more than that if they hope to get to the playoffs this year.
Frank, have a good weekend. We'll talk soon.
Always good to talk to you, Josh. Thank you.
Josh Hennig here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. Again, the Phillies currently sitting with a record of 26-30. They are third in the National League East, within striking range. This is not fully out of it, but it'll be interesting to see how the season plays out, because as I was asking Frank, I want to know what happens when we get closer to the deadline. You're 4 games out of first place. You're a half game behind the Braves. There's a lot of injuries in this division. You have to wonder what the Phillies can actually do to improve this team. And they might have to make some difficult decisions if they're serious about trying to contend this year. And then next year, it might be a very different looking lineup altogether. So great stuff from Frank. Again, follow him on Twitter at Frank Klose on Twitter. Josh Hennig here at Josh Hennig on Twitter. We'll get back to your thoughts and comments. Text board is open 609-403-0973. Also, all you guys watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Shout out to Rodney as well, watching on YouTube. What is up, Rodney? Rodney joined the Saturday crew, watching the show on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll get to all of your guys' thoughts and comments next. Don't forget, we have Jonathan Von Tobel. He is a radio host over at ESPN Radio Las Vegas. Also, he is the host of the Hardwood Handicappers podcast. He joined us before the first round of the NBA playoffs. He will now join us today before the start of the second round of the NBA playoffs. Tonight, Bucks, Nets, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, your home for the Sixers basketball, the NBA playoffs, the NBA finals, Eagles football, Flyers hockey in South Jersey. And don't forget 97.3 ESPN mobile app and 97.3 ESPN.com for all your Phillies, Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, and high school sports coverage.
Today on Major League Baseball on ESPN Radio.
Diving stab in the backhand. Altuve gets up, throws him out at first. Brilliant play by Jose Altuve.
Jose Altuve and the Houston Astros head to Buffalo, New York to face Vladimir Guerrero and the Toronto Blue Jays.
Gone. Guerrero hits a screaming line drive into the bullpen.
The Astros and Blue Jays. Listen to Major League Baseball on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 2:30.
Attention New Jersey, Matt Blatt Nissan needs to replenish their pre-owned inventory. They will buy your vehicle for cash today. You heard right. Matt Blatt Nissan will buy your current vehicle for cash or trade it for top dollar and put 0 down payment, pay 0% interest, and get $2,500 off MSRP on every 2021 Nissan Murano in stock.
Oh, yes, on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
All new loaded SV model 2021 Nissan Rogue. Lease just $239 per month with 0 security deposit. Plus our fast track checkout. Bring any vehicle and Matt Blatt Nissan will buy it for cash or pay top dollar for any trade in Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot or online at mattblattnissan.com. Negative equity will be refinanced into new vehicle. With qualifications exist. Not all will qualify. 0% APR financing based on 1667 2000 borrowed. Offers can be combined. Murano VIN MC 101371. Rogue VIN MW 011224. 36 months 10,000 miles for your lease. Lease selling price $28,590. Call 877-289-6670 or go to mattblattnissan.com for complete details. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
If you own a small business, you know how hard it can be to find new customers. Now, Town Square Media has new tools that can help your business stand out and grow. Go to getlocalcustomersnow.com for a free competitive analysis that will show you what other businesses are doing to find new customers and how you can do it too with Town Square Media. Be one of the first business owners to sign up and receive $500 in free advertising on this station. Start growing your business today. Visit getlocalcustomersnow.com. That's getlocalcustomersnow.com.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN. Final segment of the first hour. Don't forget, 1:20 today. Jonathan Von Tobel from ESPN Las Vegas Radio, also the host of the Hardcourt Handicappers podcast. Easy for me to say. We're joining us coming up at 1:20. We'll get to your guys' thoughts and comments as well. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. For all of you listening on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, text board is open, 609-403-0970. Before we get some of your guys' thoughts and comments, a couple of updates here. Doc Rivers is speaking to the media right now. Said that Joel Embiid's status is the same. He says, Doc says, quote, he did a little bit on the floor, no live scrimmaging, no live running. He did what he could, unquote. Basically, Joel Embiid is out there basically getting a sweat, okay? He's not practicing any scrimmaging. He's not running up and down the floor. He is just out there doing some work. And Doc Rivers said that there's no update. He did what he could. He was on the floor doing some practicing. I think Embiid doesn't play for at least the first couple games of this series. If you go over to 973ESPN.com and you see the Sixers schedule for the postseason over at 973ESPN.com and you kind of project out, I'm going to go into the working assumption that Joel Embiid does not play. And again, I have no inside information. I'm just projecting this based on what we've seen him do, what Doc Rivers has said he has done, and then my own experience with knee injuries, because I've torn my meniscus. I've torn my ACL on my left knee, my MCL on my right knee. And based on, I've heard from 3 different doctors now. We had Dr. Jeremy Boyd on the Sports Bash this week. You heard Dr. remember his name. Others, Dr. Pat Zukis earlier from Virtua on the Locker Room, Billy Schweim. I've heard a couple of people on television who are doctors talking about this as well. I'm going to assume that Embiid misses the first 3 games of this series. So that's tomorrow, Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday. And the reason why I say the first 3 games is because that gives you almost 2 full weeks from when he injured the knee to game 4. Game 4 is currently Monday, June 14th. Everything I've heard says that Joel Embiid is going to miss 2 to 4 weeks, is what I understand. So with that being said, I think that's where his timetable with his health is going to be. So that's the latest on Joel Embiid. Also, we told you earlier that Bryce Harper is coming off the injured list. He will be back in the lineup today, batting third for the Phillies. I'll get to some NBA coaching news as well. We got some more news that just broke a little bit ago. I'll get to that a little bit in the next hour as well. But first, I want to hear from you guys, 609-403-0973. We've talked Sixers. We've talked Phillies. We've talked Eagles today. A lot to get to. Stephen Garrison, watching on YouTube, says, to me, the Phillies need another starter, someone who can give them that clutch hit as well. Right now, they don't have that. Here's the thing with that. I don't know if you can get both a quality starter and a clutch hitter. I think you got to choose one or the other. You might be able to get a depth pitching arm and a clutch hitter, or you might be able to get a quality starter and maybe a depth bat for the bench. But I don't think you can have both. I think the Phillies, unless they're willing to upend part of their roster right now, they just don't have a lot of tradable pieces. They don't have a lot of tradable prospects. I mean, you heard Frank Klose say it. Moniak and Kingery are down in AAA, and they're striking out left and right. They're not playing well. So who are you going to trade right now to get someone that makes sense if you're the Phillies? And if I'm the Phillies, I got to make a tough decision. I got to decide if am I bailing on Hoskins or Bohm? Am I bailing on one of my pitchers? Who am I sacrificing to make a trade? Who on the Phillies organization does another team want? It's not about who you're willing to give up. It's about who on another team will want. It's a two-way street. That's how trades work. You can say all you want, the Phillies need to make a trade, but who do they have that is worth trading, and what team is interested in those players? I think that's a huge part of it. On the text board at 609-403-0973. Of course, if I could actually remember where I put things. Oh, there it is. Dan from EHD chimed in, and we're talking about Mailata and left tackle competition. Dan from EHD says the best thing about Mailata is to play both left or right tackle. Some tackles can't do that. You're right, and I understand that Mailata has that versatility. But to me, if Mailata's potential is greater than Dillard's, all right? If Mailata is a better long-term player than Dillard, I don't want him switching tackle positions. I want him staying at one position. Now, I understand people are concerned if what is Lane Johnson's future? He's coming off of that ankle surgery. Lane Johnson's not old. He's in his early 30s. Guys have surgeries, and they play for another 5-6 years. So as long as Lane doesn't have another injury, I'm not worried about right tackle right now. But if my best left tackle is Mailata, I don't want him flip-flopping. I want him staying left tackle. I want him anchoring to protect the backside of Jalen Hurts. All right, more talk coming up next. Josh Hennig here, 97.3 ESPN.
The NBA playoffs continue.
Spins in the lane. Beautiful move, and he lays it in. Triple-double for Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Giannis and the Bucks, fresh off a first-round sweep, head to Brooklyn to face Harden, Durant, Kyrie, and the Nets.
Get your popcorn ready. Offense versus defense.
Cross-court Irving, left-footer three. Good!
The Bucks and Nets. It's game one of the Eastern Conference semifinals. Coverage begins tonight at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio. It's the NBA on 97.3 ESPN.
Health Update with Robin Stoloff, brought to you by Comfort Keepers, all the comforts of home.
If you're trying to lose weight, here are 4 simple steps that can help. First, start your day with a huge glass of water and drink water throughout the day. It helps you feel fuller, boosts your metabolism, and assists in your digestion. Second, get a good night's sleep. That's right. The old saying, you snooze, you lose, could not be more accurate when it comes to shedding pounds. Depriving your body of sleep can increase hunger hormones and deter your weight loss efforts. Another way to rev up your calorie burn, enjoy a warm cup of green tea. It also contains powerful antioxidants that can help reduce your risk of cancer, and it promotes heart health. And last but not least, do your best not to drink your calories, whether it's soda, sugary beverages, or alcohol.
Brought to you by Comfort Keepers, all the comforts of home. Visit comfortkeepers.com for your free consultation.
When you support your local small businesses, it helps keep your neighbors employed, helps kids save for college, and strengthens your community. And Town Square Media South Jersey puts local businesses in the spotlight.
Ambient Comfort Heating and Cooling Professionals. AmbientComfortNJ.com.
Filling Marble and Tile Outlet, Philadelphia Avenue and Route 30 in Egg Harbor City. FillingMarble.com.
Dennisville Fence, serving you since 1952. Be the envy of your neighborhood.
Comfort Now by Bob McAllister. Improve the comfort in your home. Call 609-400-1005 and ask about discounts and rebate incentives. Visit iwantcomfortnow.com.
East Coast Roofing, Siding and Windows. Services all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up. Call East Coast today at 609-646-1444. Online at eastcoastroofing.com.
Thank you for supporting your local businesses. From Town Square Media South Jersey.
South Jersey's play-by-play home for the Eagles,
Touchdown!
Sixers, and Flyers.
He scored!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Welcome back in the second hour, Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. But we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show. Hey, everybody out there in virtual land. We got Jonathan Von Tobel to talk the NBA playoffs coming up at 1:20 p.m. Jonathan Von Tobel, host of the Hardwood Handicappers podcast. Great episode this week he had with ESPN's Doug Kazarian. Jonathan Von Tobel is also a radio host on ESPN Radio Las Vegas. He'll join us coming up. He previewed the first round. We'll get in the second round. He has an interesting pick for the Sixers-Hawks series. I thought it was a very interesting perspective he had on his podcast this week. So we'll get into that with him as well. Sixers back in action tomorrow, game 1 versus the Hawks, 1 p.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, today on 97.3 ESPN, we have the Nets and the Bucks tonight, game 1 here on 97.3 ESPN. Then Sixers tomorrow. Following the Sixers will be the Mavs Clippers game 7. So we got an NBA doubleheader tomorrow, and we got NBA action all weekend long right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget also the locker room with Billy Schwein tomorrow morning. Him and the PT from 10 a.m. to noon will get you ready for the Sixers game as well. And, of course, Mike Gill on the Sports Bash will have everything covered in the recap on Monday at 2 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN. So you got me till 2 o'clock today. Billy Schwein in the locker room with PT tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mike Gill on the Sports Bash Monday at 2 p.m. And I'll be back on Monday for game night at 6 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. All right. Reminder, text board is open, 609-403-0973. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Before we get too far along, I got to get to this news because I was, all right. So here's the deal. I didn't know if there was going to be a lot of turnover in the NBA this offseason in terms of coaches. You know, before the whole Danny Ainge stepping down, Brad Stevens thing happened this week, I was sitting around wondering how many head coach openings are there going to be this year? Because historically, you know, you kind of have an idea during a season, but because of all this COVID stuff and we're coming out of a pandemic and, teams are trying to get back on a schedule, and there was a very abbreviated offseason last year. And, it's hard to gauge certain things with this season. There's all of this weird minutia going on when it comes to the NBA. So I was wondering, like, how many teams are going to have head coach openings? Because typically every year there's like 4 to 6 openings. Well, it's now turning into a wildfire situation. So obviously Brad Stevens is now the new Danny Ainge of Boston. So the Celtics head coach job is open. Then last night they announced that Terry Stotts is done in Portland, and they're calling it a mutual parting of the ways for him to be out in Portland after 9 years. Now today, the Orlando Magic and their head coach Steve Clifford have also mutually agreed to part ways. So you now have 3 head coach openings where they were not overt firings. Technically, nobody's been fired yet. And it's such a strange situation because typically in the past, like last year, it was like days after the Pelicans left the bubble, Alvin Gentry fired. Okay. Days after the Sixers are eliminated from the playoffs last year, Brett Brown fired. It happened. It was intense. It was like, boom, breaking news. So-and-so fired. So-and-so. This year, it's more like Brad Stevens, he's moving into the front office. He doesn't want to coach anymore. And you're like, Brad Stevens? Brad Stevens is actually like a good NBA coach. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy who has had success in Boston. Boston has been to the conference finals 3 times in the last 6 years. This is a guy in Brad Stevens who, during his time in Boston, has a almost 56 winning percentage. He has he has 2 seasons of 50 or more wins. He's been to the postseason every year except his first year in Boston. But that job's open. All right, that's interesting. And obviously he's going to hire his replacement because he is now the president of basketball operations. So you have that going for you. Then you have Terry Stotts. Terry Stotts has been in Portland for basically almost a decade. He got to Portland before the 2012 season. He has almost a 52 winning percentage. Portland, during his time, has 3 50-win seasons. He's been to the postseason every year in Portland except for his first year. But they mutually agree to part ways. All right. Interesting. And now today, Steve Clifford and the Magic are mutually parting ways because Clifford is not apparently interested in being a part of the rebuild. That Clifford was apparently, in Clifford's mind, if I'm understanding the reporting out there by guys like Adrian Wojnarowski and others I'm reading online, basically Clifford, who led the Magic to the playoffs a couple times, he was not interested in the rebuild. And apparently the Magic are going to retool this roster now after they gutted it when they traded away Vucevic and Aaron Gordon before the trade deadline this year. So apparently Clifford's like, if you guys are going to rebuild, I'm out. I don't want to be here anymore. It's 3 very strange job openings in the NBA. And my biggest 2 takeaways are this. Number one, it makes you appreciate your situation if you are a team like the Sixers, or you're a team like the Lakers, or you're an organization like the Mavericks with over a decade of stability with Rick Carlisle, or if you're an organization like Milwaukee with Budenholzer, or Miami with Spoelstra. There's all these organizations in the NBA that have constant turnover and turmoil, and you're looking left and right. What the heck is going on around here? Like the great Vince Lombardi said in that famous NFL Films clip. And if I'm a coach, if I'm a fan of a team like the Sixers or the Heat or the Lakers, or like I said, a team like the Bucks, or even a team and I don't mean this to be sarcastic, but even a team like I said, Dallas, or a team like Denver, like you have coaching stability. And you look around the NBA, I have trouble believing that all three of these job openings are going to have successful tenures from the people who left them, because Boston, in my opinion, is going in the wrong direction overall. I understand that people love to point to Boston as the example of the anti-process. Boston's problem is not process or anti-process. Boston's problem is they have a lack of direction. I think that Boston needs to figure out what they want to do as a franchise, because you hit gold in drafting Tatum and Jaylen Brown. You've done a good job at collecting draft assets. You've done a good job at, getting some homegrown talent. But the rest of the roster this year was incredibly questionable. I felt that Danny Ainge did a very bad job at giving Brad Stevens and those players a good supporting cast for Tatum. You could argue that if Jaylen Brown was healthy and the Celtics had a better supporting cast around them, they could have taken the Nets 6 games at least. They won 1 game against the Celtics because for 1 game, the Celtics won 1 game with the Nets because for 1 game, the Celtics defense showed up. They did a great job at limiting the Nets, and at the same time, Tatum went off for 50 points. Doing something that even Larry Bird has never done. So I look at the Celtics and I say they have a lot of potential, but they got a lot of roster problems. I am thoroughly unimpressed with the supporting cast around Tatum and Brown. I think they got to move on from Kemba Walker. I think they got to find a way to get rid of his contract. They got to find another team that's willing to get rid of their bad contract. Bad contract for bad contract kind of deal. I don't know if Kemba's future is in Boston. They got to improve that bench. That bench was pathetic at times. Don't tell me that Williams and Williams are some great role players. If that's what you think, then you and I can't watch basketball together. Marcus Smart, he's a very, very good role player. Look, maybe he should be the point guard moving forward. Maybe it shouldn't be Kemba. But, man, they got a lot of problems in Boston. And then the Magic, they're in rebuild mode. You can forget about the Magic. In my opinion, you can literally chalk the Magic up for about another bad season or two before they come around again. And whoever the next coach is, I feel bad for him because he's walking into a situation with a rudderless franchise that a year or two ago looked like they were making progress, they were growing, they were developing, and then they had the 2 major injuries this year, the Fultz and Isaac. Then they blow up the roster by trading away Vucevic and Gordon. So whoever's going there, I mean, I might as well just hire Brett Brown because apparently Brett Brown's the only guy who's been able to take a team from rebuild the postseason and have any modicum of success because that franchise is completely rudderless. And I don't know if anybody knows what they're doing down there. To me, Portland's the ideal job because if you are a head coach, you're going to a team that has a top 10 player in the league in Damian Lillard, potentially even a top 5 player, depending on who you ask. I mean, Lillard is a superstar among superstars, all right? CJ McCollum is a very, very, very good all-star caliber supporting character. He's a perfect complement to Lillard. Portland has some decisions to make in free agency. Do they keep Nurkic? Do they move on from Nurkic? What do they do with Collins long term? Do they bring back Norman Powell? Do they let him walk in free agency? But I think there's a lot to work with there. And if Portland could just play some defense, that was Stotts' biggest problem. They couldn't play defense at all in Portland for the last couple of years. Their defense was absolutely atrocious. And it's pretty bad when the 3 guys who are trying the hardest on defense are Lillard, McCollum, and Carmelo. You brought in Covington to help with your defense, and he didn't play that great defense. Nurkic was pathetic at times in the postseason the last 2 years. So you got to bring in a head coach who's going to revitalize that team, make them tougher, make them better defensively, and you could turn that thing around very quickly and make that team an NBA championship contender if you make the right moves. Now, I see Rodney over here on YouTube. By the way, you can text in as well at 609-403-0973 to join the conversation. Rodney watching on YouTube says, with Steve Clifford's defensive acumen, someone should send him a plane ticket to Portland immediately. Here's the problem. I don't think Clifford's getting the Portland job because there's two specific reports that have come out and that have been confirmed in the last 24 hours. So Adrian Wojnarowski first reported that, and this report has been confirmed by multiple sources, that the main four people who are atop the list for Portland's front office, like the people that they want initially for the job, are, let me just get the list real quick so I don't misname anybody, but Portland's front office, this is who they'll want to talk to immediately. Clippers assistant coach Chauncey Billups, former NBA head coach Jeff Van Gundy, Nets assistant Mike D'Antoni, and Michigan's head coach Juwan Howard. And then another report came out that was reported by Chris Haynes at Yahoo Sports and then confirmed by Brandon Scoopy Robinson, who you've heard here on 97.3 ESPN multiple times, that Damian Lillard wants them to interview Jason Kidd. And apparently there's a lot of signals pointing that Jason Kidd is going to be a hot candidate for this team. So for me, if I'm ranking the candidates, it's Jason Kidd because the superstar won, so he has to be considered. Chauncey Billups, because I think that he would bring an incredible amount of poise and maturity to that team for a head coaching job that was really stale and stagnant for a long time. And honestly, outside of those two guys, I have zero interest in the rest of the candidates. I don't want to see another retread in Van Gundy. We see how Stan worked out in New Orleans, not going that well. Mike D'Antoni has got enough jobs in this league. Mike D'Antoni has now coached the Lakers, the Rockets, the Suns, the Knicks. Enough is enough with the D'Antoni. The dude has won nothing in this league. He's never gotten to an NBA Finals. He only wins with certain styles and certain teams. The dude, enough of the D'Antoni talk as a head coach. Either get someone who's got a resume or give someone like Billups a shot. And Jason Kidd, you could argue, got a raw deal in Milwaukee. So I hear what you're saying, Rodney. I would love to see Steve Clifford get another job. I would say Clifford should get the Boston job. He should be a lead candidate for that job. Him and Sam Cassell, the Sixers assistant. But I don't think Portland's going to hire him. I think they're going to go big game hunting. All right, we'll get more in the NBA coming up next. NBA playoff talk with Jonathan Von Tobel, Hardwood Handicappers podcast, ESPN Radio Las Vegas host next year on 97.3 ESPN FM, 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City. And we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'm Josh Hennig, your host. Follow me on Twitter at Josh Hennig.
It's Sixers playoff basketball tomorrow, right here on 97.3 ESPN, with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McInnes, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Maxey steals the ball. Maxey on the run with Westbrook there, and he jammed it.
It's Sixers Hawks Game 1 tomorrow. Coverage begins at 1 p.m. It's Philadelphia 76ers playoff basketball, and it's only on South Jersey's official Sixers station, 97.3 ESPN.
When you support your local small businesses, it helps keep your neighbors employed, helps kids save for college, and strengthens your community. And Town Square Media South Jersey puts local businesses in the spotlight.
First Bank of Sea Isle City, Cape County's community bank.
Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelylback.com.
Egg Harbor Independent Branch Leader at Charles Schwab in the Consumer Square Shopping Plaza.
Filling Marble and Tile Outlet, Philadelphia Avenue and Route 30 in Egg Harbor City. Visit fillingmarble.com.
Intuitive Women's Health in Summers Point, accepting new patients. Schedule an appointment today online at intuitivewomenshealth.net.
East Coast Roofing, Siding and Windows. Services all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up. Call East Coast today at 609-646-1444. Online at eastcoastroofing.com.
Thank you for supporting your local businesses. From Town Square Media South Jersey.
Start with everyone with a brand new puppy they cannot leave home alone. And there he is now, disemboweling a sofa. Now narrow it to the puppy parents who need to get their prescriptions refilled today. For you, there's Walgreens same-day prescription delivery. Medication sent right to your door from the local Walgreens you already know and trust. So you can spend all day at home teaching your new puppy some manners. Elroy, roll over. Or just sit there and tilt your head. Aww. To join, text JOIN-RX to 21525.
PropSwap is the #1 app to buy and sell sports bets. Derek from Galloway made $800 cash just from buying and selling sports bets on PropSwap. Basketball, baseball, hockey. Just buy a future bet, hold it for a few weeks, then sell it for big profit. And if you're a buyer looking for better odds than what a sports book can offer, there's never been a better time to join PropSwap. As new users right now, get a free $100 match bonus. But hurry, the offer expires soon. Check out PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN, 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We'll get more in the NBA playoffs right now. He joined us for the first round of the NBA playoffs a couple weeks ago. Now he's back for the second round of the NBA playoffs. He is Jonathan Von Tobel joining us right now on the Boardwalk on a hotline. Of course, we have Nets versus Bucks tonight, game 1 on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow, Sixers versus Hawks. We'll get into all of that and more. Jonathan, how you doing today?
I'm good. You know, I'm wearing the Clippers hat, and I'm hoping I can throw some good vibes to my guys. The Los Angeles Clippers come back and eventually win this series. But it's been a good postseason. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of good storylines.
So before we get into that, I want to touch on a topic that you were talking about on your podcast this week, the Hardwood Handicappers. And that is, I've talked about this with my audience before, and it's about and I know it's an overused term, but it's the idea of finding value, not just making bets for making bets, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are like, oh, I want to play. I want to play. And you were talking about the fact you were like, well, I don't know if Anthony Davis is playing or not. So why am I going to make a play without limited information? And I think a lot of people are asking me the same question. Well, what if Embiid plays or doesn't play with the Sixers? And I'm like, well, obviously there's different ways this series can go. And I think that people don't understand that you don't just throw money out there when it comes to sports betting. You got to make an informed decision. I think sometimes we overlook that when it comes to sports betting because people assume, oh, well, you guys are sports guys. And it's like, well, no, we're not wasting our own money. So we're not going to tell you to waste your money.
Right. You know, it's funny. It's an old cliche when you talk about sports betting, but sometimes the best bet is not making one, right? You know, your biggest weapon as a handicapper is the fact that you don't have to bet on every single one of those games, but a bookmaker has to book every single one of those games. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And that Suns and Lakers series, especially toward the end, is a perfect example of why in the world you would want to. I know a couple of people who saw that Anthony Davis was going to play and was like, I'm in. And I thought, I was like, well, you don't even know how healthy he is. You just know that he's going to play. And sure enough, what happens? He goes out there, looks nowhere near, I don't even think 20%, is grabbing at the groin, doesn't look healthy. Sure enough, one play, he goes down to the floor and never comes back, and they lose that game. So you're absolutely right. People do want plays, you want action, that's fine, but you got to make educated decisions about a lot of these bets, and sometimes the best bet is not making one, especially in circumstances like this Philly-Atlanta series, where, I'm looking up reports early this morning to see if there's been any update, and there isn't. We don't know if he's going to be there for game 1, game 2, or any part of this series.
Well, that leads me to my next thing, which is, here's the interesting thing with me with the Sixers. So the Sixers keep calling him day-to-day. Obviously, he's practicing, kind of. He's what they're calling working up a sweat is the term they call it. Now, every person I've heard from, we've had multiple doctors here on 97.3 ESPN. I see people on TV. Everyone says this is a 2 to 4 week injury. So my working theory right now is I don't think he plays until game 4 at minimum. I think they get the full 2 weeks out of it. He obviously is wearing a knee sleeve after he got the MRI. So obviously this is partially a pain thing than it is an actual injury thing. So with that kind of information, do you approach a series like the Sixers and Hawks and just say, how about we just assume that Embiid isn't going to play and we evaluate it that way?
You could, right? But at the same time, like, we saw what Anthony Davis did, right? Like, these guys do believe, obviously, and it's the playoffs. It's very important that there's probably going to be an effort to play through pain or play to a certain extent where they probably shouldn't come back slightly earlier than they probably shouldn't, because at the end of the day, well, it might be, hey, we might not be available at the beginning of the series. You might need them, right? There's a Hawks team that's playing extremely good basketball that's gotten very good since Nate McMillan has taken over. I tend to think that in the postseason, guys will come back slightly earlier than expected on a normal injury, because they think, one, it's the machismo factor, but it's the other is these are important games. We need our best players out there type of a deal. And like, it's hard too when you look at this, because I will say that, when you look at a series price, for example, right, it's hovering around $2. Some spots are just under the $2. You could go into that thinking, but at the same time, if it's going to be that way, like, it should probably be a little bit cheaper. I feel like there's so many different ways to look at it where it's too many unknowns that I would just not feel comfortable handicapping it one way or the other,
I hear you. I mean, for me, I've already made my pick. I'm going Sixers and 7, because my working theory is that either what's going to happen is all the home teams are going to win their games, because we know the Sixers are really good at home, the Hawks are really good at home, or there's going to be a split somewhere along the way. It's going to be a best of 3 at the end, and maybe Embiid comes back in the end. Because to me, at the end of the day, my theory on the NBA so far right now, you told me to think about this, Jonathan. Jonathan Von Tobel joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN, at MeJVT on Twitter. I think the way to win almost every series in the NBA at this point is let the other team's best scorer just do what he's going to do. You're not stopping Kevin Durant. You're not stopping Trae Young. You're not stopping Bradley Beal. You're not stopping Damian Lillard. But if you can stop everyone else and limit their ability to win, you can win. The problem is you got to have a good defensive team to do it. I think the Sixers are a good enough defensive team to actually execute that.
Yeah. I think each situation is unique, right? Like, I would argue that Portland tried to do that. Nikola Jokic scored whenever he wanted. He averaged about 30 points in that series, and he ended up winning that thing, right? So every situation is unique. But to your point, Denver, I don't know if they allowed Damian Lillard to do it or Damian Lillard just did it because he's incredible, averaging well over 35 points per game in that series, decimated them, and they ended up losing that game in 6. But I thought that was more of defensive liabilities on the Portland side than anything else. But you do see that strategy to a certain extent. You could very much argue that in that Hawks series against the Knicks, Trae Young was absolutely fantastic, but the ancillary pieces were also great too. Bogdan Bogdanovic in crunch time was absolutely incredible. Clint Capella destroyed him on so many of those lobs in those pick and roll situations. So to an extent, that's probably going to be the strategy. But what do you do against a team like Brooklyn, right? Where arguably all three of those guys are their best scorers on any given night. So it's pretty tough from that standpoint when you're looking at it if a team, if you're willingly allowing the best player to score points. Now, I think a team like Brooklyn might need to do something like that because they don't really have an answer for Giannis Antetokounmpo. So now it's about shutting down the other pieces around him. So I think every situation is unique when it comes to that strategy for sure.
So overall, you mentioned about, how you're going to bet some of these series. So, in your opinion, when it comes to the two Eastern Conference series, Sixers, Hawks, Bucks, Nets, I personally think it's going to be Sixers in 7 and Bucks in 7. So, but how are you approaching it in terms of, are you betting hard? Are you betting light? Are you kind of letting it play out? Talk to the audience a little bit about some of the things you talked about on your podcast. But I thought your strategy was very interesting. You said, listen, I go into the beginning of the series one way, but I see playing out the series and I kind of see how things go and then I make another bet.
Yeah, well, and so for that strategy, mainly what I've done this first round, save for the Hawks series, because I had an overwhelming amount of confidence in the Atlanta Hawks as that series played out. But in both the Denver and Portland series and the Lakers and Suns series, really what I was just doing was locking in profit just in case something were to happen, right? The Suns-Lakers series, for example, after game 1, took a wager on the Los Angeles Lakers at even money to win that thing. And then after game 3, in which they take a 2-1 series lead, put just enough on the Phoenix Suns that you're making a small amount of profit and your wager back if the Suns were to pull this thing out. So I would have much rather the Lakers would have won that thing. The profit would have been much larger. But either way, you lock in a little bit of something and you mitigate the risk. Same thing with Denver, right? Had Denver before the series started at about plus 112, and then going into those best of sevens after they had won game 5 and took a 3-2 lead, just a little on Portland to just mitigate the loss in case something happens, but still lock in a profit either way. And, that's a good way to handle a lot of these series. Locking in profit and making sure you're coming away with something is the way to go. I know sometimes we get a little greedy. Got a buddy who had the Lakers after game 1 was like, no, Lakers are going to do it. It's fine. And, sure enough, they didn't. And they ended up losing that thing. So I tend to be a little bit safer when it comes to the series bets, unless I have some overwhelming confidence in one side or the other, like I did with Atlanta. And as far as these series are concerned, look, it's funny, how sports betting works for the most part. Take this Nets and Bucks series, for example. I think the Nets are going to win this series, but I think it's going to be a very tight series. I think it's going to be a 7-game series where if the team is going to win, it has to win on the margins and have the little things go in their favor. But I also think that if that series price reaches about 2-1 on Milwaukee, that there is some value in that, right? If you're telling me in terms of minus 230, if you're going to tell me that the Nets are winning that series over 7 out of 10 times, I think it's a little high, right? An implied probability of around 70% might be too high considering that these two teams are so closely tight together, at least by my ranking. So while I do think the Nets are going to win, I'm actually sitting back and seeing that if Milwaukee reaches 2-1 again on that series price, I'm going to be all in on a price like that because I think the implied probability is a little too low on Milwaukee if you get back to that 2-1.
How do you factor in coaching when it comes to evaluating these series? Because I was thinking about this today. There are 3 head coach openings right now, and all 3 of those coaches were in the postseason just a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve Nash, 0 coaching experience in the postseason. Budenholzer, a good amount. Doc Rivers won a championship. Ty Lue won a championship, but it was with Cleveland, with LeBron. So, we don't really know what that really means. So, how do you factor in, the coaching aspect when it comes to evaluating these series?
I mean, you have to. I don't know if there's really, to me personally, I don't know if there's a numerical value, right, to a coach, but take Rick Carlisle, for example. Rick Carlisle is a very big reason. I'd say it's Luka Doncic and Rick Carlisle why the Dallas Mavericks are giving the Los Angeles Clippers such a hard time. If you go back, so we'll go to game 3, right? The end of game 3, and when they're down, the Clippers, 30-15 at the beginning, and then they start to make their comeback. One of the things that Ty Lue discovered was, hey, Nick Batum playing 5 actually kind of works for me here. Let's roll with this into game 4. So game 4, they start that lineup. Again, it bothers the Mavericks, and they win that game. So Carlisle, what he does and says, okay, well, for game 5, I am going to roll out a big lineup with Boban Marjanovic. I'm going to play Max Kleber a lot. We're going to play zone a lot. You're not going to get within 4 feet of the basket like you've been doing the last 2 games. And sure enough, what happens? They end up winning that game. They take a 3-2 lead. So coaches can make a massive difference in a lot of these series, right? Ty Lue, I think still his coaching acumen could be called into question. I think Kawhi Leonard the other night really just kind of bailed the Clippers out with a massive performance. But you're right. coaches will swing series. Look at Michael Malone, for example. Michael Malone, there's no way that game between the Trailblazers and the Nuggets back, I think it was a game 5, you should not have gone to double overtime, right? You foul when you're up 3 like that, and yet Michael Malone didn't twice, and that extends the game. So coaching 100% will change things up. I think you approach it, though, on like more of a game-to-game basis in an in-game type scenario. Like once you see that Rick Carlisle has made that adjustment, right, then you can go in and feel more confident in-game betting on a Dallas Mavericks, for example. When you see that Michael Malone is not going to foul up 3 at the end of regulation, then going into the other overtime situation, you can feel comfortable maybe really in-game firing on a Portland Trailblazers team to extend that and maybe grab some points. Like those are the types of things when it comes to coaching that I think factor more, like in-game and watching on a game-to-game basis as opposed to a series.
Obviously, you mentioned the Clippers, Mavs tomorrow. Folks, you hear that game right here on 97.3 ESPN following the Sixers and Hawks game 1. I mean, the road team has won every single game in that series. I see you're wearing the Clippers hat. I know you're obviously probably leading a certain way, but I want to ask it this way. Clippers win game 7 if?
Clippers can win game 7 if they shoot the ball relatively well, right? I think if you look at some of their worst performances in this series, right, where their offense has fallen off, you can look at this last game that they just won. Like the three-point shooting was around 36, 35%. They were missing wide open threes, and then they start to get them knocked down. Kawhi Leonard takes over. He's hitting his own three-point shots, and they end up winning that game. You go back to game 1, in which they were thoroughly beat on their home court. The three-point shots weren't falling. You can go to game 5 where they shot, I think, 36% from 3. This is the team that finished first in three-point shooting in the regular season at 42.1%. They were first in corner three-point shooting. They were first in above the break three-point shooting in terms of percentage. And the three-point shooting has been inconsistent at times in this series. So I would think that would be at the top of the list. Like the Clippers are winning this game and they're winning this series if their three-point shooting is going to even out and be at the same level that it was throughout the regular season.
Jonathan Von Tobel joining us here on Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the second round of the NBA playoff starts tonight. Bucks versus Nets. I'm going to say Celtics. Good grief. Bucks versus Nets here on 97.3 ESPN. So obviously we have almost all the playoff matchups set aside from the Clippers, Mavs having to iron things out tomorrow. So what do you think the conference finals are going to be in each conference right now?
So I think I told you when I was on with you guys right before the series started, my pick before the playoff started was Clippers and Nets in the NBA finals. And when you look at the conference finals and what they could potentially, if my team's still alive, I'll ride with them, right? The guys that I pick. So I think the Clippers can win this series. I think they can move on. I still think they match up well with the Jazz. And I think they find their way to a Western Conference Finals berth against the Phoenix Suns. The Suns, I think, match up really well with Denver. It's funny, Denver, think about that luck, right? Your backcourt's ravaged with injury. You get by in 6 games against Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and Norman Powell. And now you have Devin Booker and Chris Paul waiting for you. It's just such a terrible matchup for them in that regard. So I think Phoenix, especially now, remember 3 days between, the end of that series with the Lakers and game 1 against the Nuggets, that's going to be a good amount of time for Chris Paul to get ready, get right, and heal up a little bit. So I think you're going to get a Suns-Clippers matchup in that Western Conference Finals with the Clippers eventually, taking that and getting to the NBA Finals. Will stick with that. And then the East, I like that Nets team. I think it's going to be a tight series. Not by any stretch are they going to be comfortable, but a Nets-Sixers Eastern Conference Finals would not surprise me in any way whatsoever.
Now, you mentioned Portland a couple times already. I got to ask you about this because I'll talk about it before you came on. This is the strangest head coaching situation I've ever seen in my life. Like last year, it's like Alvin Gentry leaves the bubble, fired. Sixers get kicked out of the playoffs. Brett Brown, 2 days later, fired. Just fired this guy fired. And this year it's, Brad Stevens is moving into the front office. There's a coach opening. Terry Stotts and Steve Clifford mutually part ways. There's head coach opening. The vibe of this coach opening situation is completely opposite of what I was expecting in the NBA. It's like, guys just happen to be leaving jobs. Whereas, yes, it's like dudes fired left and right.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, and I think the Stotts thing, it seemed to be wearing pretty thin. I think at the end of last season, too, there were reports and rumblings that relationship was near an end, and he was kind of a lame duck coach. So it seemed like they were kind of, unless something dramatic had happened this year, right, a Western Conference Finals run yet again, that was kind of reaching its end. And the Trailblazers, by the way, are kind of at a crossroads now, too, right? The rumblings that Damian Lillard could potentially be on the move. We could see a pretty different Portland team by the time we get to next season. So that makes some sense, right? The Magic, for example, I think that's why we get this kind of cohesive vibe with these coaching changes. The Magic too. Magic finally tore everything down this year, right? Traded Nikola Vucevic, traded away Aaron Gordon. So you're finally seeing them, Evan Fournier as well. So they're kind of just going on a different path. Clifford doesn't really vibe with their timeline at that point right now. And then you get the Celtics. The Celtics are weird, right? The Celtics thing is a little different because, look, Brad Stevens is a good coach, right? Is he as good as I think the conversation was around him at his peak? No, right? There was those stupid conversations about you could pick any player or Brad Stevens. Who would you pick? Like he's not that good, but he's good. And he made it to 3 Eastern Conference Finals. But that one seemed to be a mental thing, right? He had the quote that the bubble really took a lot out of him, that he didn't really enjoy the grind of coaching anymore. It is surprising to see him make that leap, but it does seem that all of these coaching situations that we're seeing right now open up, there is this symbiotic vibe because I do think they actually kind of mesh with one another in terms of the directions that they're going.
I'm going to steal a question from my colleague here at 97.3 ESPN, Mike Gill, and I'll ask it to you. Can Brad Stevens find a head coach who's actually as good or better than him for that job?
I don't know if that as good or better. I mean, that's hard, right? Sometimes you just stumble into it. You have no idea what you actually got in front of you as a head coach. So I would probably tend to say no, but there's some good coaching candidates out there. I'm a big Kenny Atkinson fan, right? Kenny did a great job with the Brooklyn Nets when he was there. He seemed to be a really solid guy in terms of player development. Is he going to be a guy that is going to be there? Juwan Howard seems to be right, checking all the boxes and making some noise in terms of an NBA coaching gig as well. So I think it's all unique, and it all depends on the right situation. We've seen coaches go to second spots and do a lot better than they did the first time around. So I think the answer is no, just because the probability, it's just so hard to do that.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Steve Clifford goes to Boston as well because the defensive mentality and everything that he brings to the table. Boston's going to be the most fascinating one to me just because of the fact that, Jonathan, I don't know what Boston's doing at this point. I thought Danny Ainge did a horrible job of putting a team around Tatum and Brown this year. They gotta answer the Kemba question, right? And we've never seen Brad Stevens run an organization, so I have no idea what that's going to look like. To me, Boston is extremely fascinating. Like you said, Portland just comes down to if Damian Lillard's there or not. If Lillard's there, they go one direction. If he's not there, they go another direction. And then the Magic, I could care less. They're in a rebuild at this point. So I mean, you might as well chalk them up for the lottery for the next 2 years, then forget about it.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think Boston, because look, I mean, you said the Kemba Walker question. I think it's been answered. It's a bad contract right now. That is something where if you're going to get off of that, you have to trade assets to get off of that. You have to, select or send along maybe a first-round pick or something if someone's going to pick up a contract like that. So that's kind of been answered. They're just kind of in a tight spot there. I will say that there are worse situations to be had than having cornerstones like, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to build around. But they're in a very bad cap situation, and how they navigate out of that with a first-time executive, I think, is really fascinating. And I think that's why a lot of people kind of scratch their heads. This is the first time for Brad Stevens. Sure, he can surround himself with all sorts of smart people, and some reports indicate that it's going to be some of the same Ainge people that might stick around to that front office. And then what was the point? You're kind of rolling with the status quo here. So I am fascinated because there's some things you really like about the Boston gig, and there's some things that you really don't like about it, and how they navigate themselves out of this into contention is going to be fascinating.
He's Jonathan Von Tobel. Follow him on Twitter at MeJVT on Twitter. The podcast is the Hardwood Handicappers Podcast. And, of course, like all guests, he appeared right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Good luck to your Clippers tomorrow. Yeah. Hopefully that works out for you. And the NBA playoffs have given us no reason to not watch, to say the least, so far.
Yep, it's been awesome, man. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you jumping on. Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff from JVT there. I mean, this coach situation would be fascinating. He's going Clippers tomorrow. And to me, I have to agree with him because I have trouble believing that when push comes to shove, that Kawhi Leonard is going to let that team lose. Now, maybe Rick Carlisle, like he said, comes up with a great, adjustment for this game. Maybe they take Kawhi out of the game and dare Paul George and Rajon Rondo to win them a game. I don't know, but man, I just tend to think that Kawhi is going to find a way. And listen, man, if Kawhi doesn't find a way, it'll be the first NBA Finals in a decade. It doesn't have either LeBron, Steph, or Kawhi in it. That's insane. Absolutely insane. That we could have a team win the NBA championship that either has never won it this year or hasn't won it in Sixers' most recent one, 1983. Every other team right now who's in the NBA playoffs is either never won a championship Or, a team like the Sixers, 83. A team like the Bucks, it was 71. The Hawks were in St. Louis when they won the NBA championship. And that's it. So it's going to be a great NBA playoffs. I can't wait to watch it. We'll get back to your thoughts and comments next. Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation. Also, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. I'll give you my FanDuel Sportsbook pick for the weekend. I got a little same game parlay when it comes to tonight's Bucks Nets game. You hear right here on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers, 1 o'clock tomorrow, followed by Clippers, Mavs, Game 7.
The NBA playoffs continue.
Spins in the lane, beautiful move, and he lays it in. Triple-double for Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Giannis and the Bucks, fresh off a first-round sweep, head to Brooklyn to face Harden, Durant, Kyrie, and the Nets.
Get your popcorn ready. Offense versus defense.
Cross-court Irving, left corner three, good!
The Bucks and Nets. It's game 1 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. Coverage begins tonight at 7 Eastern on ESPN Radio. It's the NBA on 97.3 ESPN.
Attention, New Jersey. Matt Blatt Nissan needs to replenish their pre-owned inventory. They will buy your vehicle for cash today. You heard right. Matt Blatt Nissan will buy your current vehicle for cash or trade it for top dollar and put 0 down payment, pay 0% interest, and get $2,500 off MSRP on every 2021 Nissan Murano in stock.
It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
All new loaded SV model 2021 Nissan Rogue. Lease just $239 per month with 0 security deposit. Plus our fast track checkout. Bring any vehicle and Matt Blatt Nissan will buy it for cash or pay top dollar for any trade in Egg Harbor Township next to Home Depot or online at mattblattnissan.com. David Beckley will be refinanced into new vehicle with qualifications exist. Not all will qualify. 0% APR financing based on 1667 per thousand borrowed. Offers can be combined. Murano VIN MC 101371. Rogue VIN MW 011224. 36 months 10,000 miles for your lease. Lease selling price $28,590. Call 877-289-6670 or go to mattblattnissan.com for complete details. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
You have the choice, whether it's going out for dinner or ordering takeout at a local restaurant or buying that new outfit from a local boutique. Those choices help to put money back into your community. And Town Square Media South Jersey puts a spotlight on local businesses.
First Bank of Sea Isle City, Cape May County's community bank.
Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelylback.com.
Egg Harbor Independent Branch Leader at Charles Schwab in the Consumer Square Shopping Plaza.
Filling Marble and Tile Outlet, Philadelphia Avenue and Route 30 in Egg Harbor City. FillingMarble.com.
Intuitive Women's Health in Summers Point, accepting new patients. Schedule an appointment today at intuitivewomenshealth.net.
East Coast Roofing, Siding, and Windows services all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up. Call East Coast today at 609-646-1444. Online at eastcoastroofing.com.
Thank you for supporting your local businesses. From Town Square Media, South Jersey.
Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN. Final segment of the show. Don't forget, Sports Bash Saturday with yours truly, Josh Hennig. Brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, promo code Hennig. When you sign up, your first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Same game parlay tonight. Bucks versus Nets. You can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. I just realized that the over-under on the Bucks-Nets game has gone up 4 points since I previously made this bet. So we're going to have to change this thing up a little bit. So we are going to same-game parlay this thing a little bit differently than my original plan. Here's what we're going to do. Because, you know, we only can do same-game parlays with FanDuel Sportsbook. So we're going to go alternate point spread over 232.5. Combined it with 8 or more assists from James Harden with Kevin Durant, the over 30.5 points tonight. It's plus 180 odds. Throw $10 on it. You walk away with $28 altogether. So a nice little profit there. If you want to go heavy, you want to go light. And of course, if you miss one leg on your parlay, you get your bet back up to $10 only with FanDuel Sportsbook. Of course, must be 21 or to play. Present in New Jersey. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Full terms and conditions at sportsbook.fanduel.com. There's your little same game parlay. I know I give you guys a lot of UFC bets usually on the show. I'm going to tell you right now, as I was talking with Jonathan Von Tobel just a little bit ago, there's no value here. I'm being 100% serious. There is no value on this UFC card unless you want to dig really deep and you want to just go how the fight's going to end, and you want to go method of victory for Rosenstrike. There's no value here. I'm just being honest with you guys. This is not a value opportunity. So I'm not even going to act like I'm going to give you a bunch of bets here for this. I mean, Rosenstrike is a plus 140 if he wins by knockout or TKO. If you want to go with that, fine. I mean, that's it. There's no other value here. So you got to wait for next week for the real value. But I gave you the same game parlay. We're still hanging around 61% on the win column. I was running the numbers the other day. What are we at there? Let me just pull up my sheet again here. We're almost at 200 wins since last May in terms of the overall bets. We're at 198 right now. We're at 61% winning percentage. So the NBA basketball seasons have brought down the percentage a little bit from football and MMA, but still doing pretty good. If you're, for those of you out there who take every one of my bets, if you're walking away with a 61% winning percentage, you're probably pretty happy. So I'm glad to help. Like I was telling with Jonathan Von Tobel, I have no confidence in sitting here just telling you to make bets. Oh, make picks so you can make your picks. That's useless. I'm not going to do that to you guys. Not going to do that at all. All right, let's run back down a little bit of the conversation we've had today. So just to update you guys on all the news, Joel Embiid did practice today, but it was not part of the live scrimmages. He's just getting a sweat in, getting some shots up. That's it. So that's what we know about that. I still don't think Embiid plays tomorrow. on the game. I'm going to go with the doctors. Every doctor we've heard from, whether it's the doctor from Virtua and Billy Schweim's show this morning, whether it's Dr. Jeremy Boyd from Trifecta Therapeutics on the Sports Bash, whether it is the orthopedic doctors on TV, I'm going with 2 to 4 weeks. And I think that means he misses at least the first 3 games of this series. I think they're calling him day to day to mess with the Hawks. I think Doc Rivers is trying to play some gamesmanship, try to manipulate the Hawks a little bit, make them plan for multiple scenarios, force them to maybe overthink a little bit, maybe try to get a little hand up on the situation. I think that's what's going on. I don't think that Embiid is actually going to play tomorrow. I think he plays in this series, but I think he misses at least the first 3 games. That's my personal prediction and theory moving forward. Some good news today. Bryce Harper is been activated from the injured list. He will be playing in right field today for the Philadelphia Phillies as they take on the Nats after a rough 2-1 loss last night. Listen, Scherzer, Wheeler, it was a great pitching matchup, but we all know at the end of the day that the Phillies need help, and they gotta make a deal, but it might be a deal you're happy with. All right. They need a lot more in order to win this division. So a lot to get to, a lot to work on throughout this weekend. Don't forget Nets versus Bucks tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow, Sixers at 1 p.m. versus the Hawks. Game 1. Game 7 of the Mavs Clippers at 3:30 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Your home for Sixers basketball, the NBA playoffs, Eagles football, Flyers hockey, the World Series, Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night football. We got you covered all the time on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Of course, you get all your Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, and Phillies coverage on 97.3 ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Wrapping up the show here. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in on the text board and watching on YouTube. Thanks also to Frank Klose for joining us earlier today. Jonathan Von Tobel was great. If you missed my conversation with JVT, it'll be up on our YouTube channel a little bit later this afternoon. Tomorrow, Billy Schwein in the locker room is back with Pete Thompson at 10 a.m. before Sixers play at 1 p.m. Tom McGinnis on the call. And then at 2 p.m. on Monday, Mike Gill is back with the Sports Bash to recap the entire weekend. I'll be back on Monday at 6 p.m. for game night. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay hydrated. Stay cool. I'll catch you Monday.
Today on Major League Baseball on ESPN Radio.
Diving stab in the backhand. Altuve gets up, throws him out at first. Brilliant play by Jose Altuve.
Jose Altuve and the Houston Astros head to Buffalo, New York to face Vladimir Guerrero and the Toronto Blue Jays.
Gone! Guerrero hits a screaming line drive into the bullpen.
The Astros and Blue Jays. Listen to Major League Baseball on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 2:30.